They say a mother's intuition can save a life, but in my case, it was a sudden wave of morning sickness that kept me out of a body bag. My husband walked into my office with a romantic anniversary breakfast and a smile that seemed a little too perfect. I didn't know that every spoonful of that meal was laced with a high dose of poison. I didn't know that by giving that food to my secretary, I was signing her death warrant and uncovering a secret that would turn my perfect marriage into a crime scene. If I hadn't been pregnant, I wouldn't be here to tell you this story. My name is Elena, and as the CEO of a top-tier firm in the heart of Chicago, I thought I was in control of everything, but the man I shared my bed with was playing a much deadlier game. It was our 4th anniversary, a day that should have been filled with celebration, yet they say a mother's intuition can save a life. But in my case, it was a sudden wave of morning sickness that kept me out of a body bag. My husband walked into my office with a romantic anniversary breakfast and a smile that seemed a little too perfect. I didn't know that every spoonful of that meal was laced with a high dose of poison. I didn't know that by giving that food to my secretary, I was signing her death warrant and uncovering a secret that would turn my perfect marriage into a crime scene. If I hadn't been pregnant, I wouldn't be here to tell you this story. My name is Elena, and as the CEO of a top-tier firm in the heart of Chicago, I thought I was in control of everything, but the man I shared my bed with was playing a much deadlier game. It was our 4th anniversary, a day that should have been filled with celebration, yet Marcus walked in carrying a designer thermal carafe as if it were a trophy. The smell of the spicy shrimp gumbo inside was overwhelming, a thick, pungent aroma that generally would have made my mouth water, but today it felt like a physical assault on my senses. Being 12 weeks pregnant is a secret I was planning to share with him tonight, but the nausea was so relentless that the mere thought of shellfish made my throat tighten in a silent scream. Marcus was insistent, his voice dropping into that low, persuasive tone he used to close multi-million-dollar deals, telling me how he had stayed up all night cleaning the shrimp and perfecting the broth just for me. I saw a flicker of something dark in his eyes when I pushed the bowl away, a flash of irritation that he quickly masked with a fake pout. When my ambitious new assistant, Maya, walked in wearing a dress that clung to her curves like a second skin, I saw an escape route. I offered her the meal, laughing about how I'd already indulged in a massive breakfast, and watched her eyes light up at the prospect of a free gourmet lunch from the boss's husband. I didn't realize I was handing her a death sentence as she skipped out of the room. Like and subscribe to see the horrifying moments the truth comes out. The silence of the executive floor didn't last long, as exactly 60 minutes later, a sound erupted from the break room that I will hear in my nightmares until the day I die. It was a blood-curdling, guttural scream of pure agony that brought everyone running, and when I reached the center of the office, I found a scene that looked like a horror movie. Maya was on the floor, the expensive gumbo splattered across her desk like a grisly warning, but it was the state of her body that made me freeze in my tracks. She was convulsing, her face drained of color and twisted into a mask of unbearable pain, while a deep crimson stain began to spread rapidly across the back of her beige skirt. I looked up and saw Marcus standing in the doorway of his office, but he wasn't rushing to help or calling for a medic. He was staring at the pool of blood with a look of stunned, demented rage, his eyes darting to me as if he couldn't believe I was still standing. The search for answers began the moment the paramedics loaded her onto the stretcher, and the atmosphere in the waiting room was thick with a tension that felt like a coiled snake. I watched Marcus pace the hallway, his impeccable suit now wrinkled and his hands trembling, not with grief, but with the fear of a man who realized his trap had caught the wrong prey. When the doctor finally emerged, his voice was grave as he explained that it wasn't a food allergy or a simple stomach bug, but an intentional poisoning using a massive dose of an abortion-inducing drug. My heart stopped as the medical terms washed over me, and the terrifying truth began to take shape in my mind. Marcus knew about the baby, and he had tried to end the life of his own child while pretending to be the perfect husband. The search for the why became even darker when the nurse mentioned that Maya was also pregnant, a secret she had been hiding from the office, but clearly not from the man pacing in the hallway. Make sure to like and subscribe to hear how this betrayal goes even deeper. The confrontation didn't happen in a private room or a quiet corner. It happened right there in the sterile, cold hallway of the emergency room as the police began asking questions Marcus couldn't answer. He tried to pivot immediately, pointing his finger at me and telling the detectives that I was a jealous wife who had discovered his affair and poisoned the food to get revenge on his mistress. It was a calculated, evil move to flip the script and send me to prison for a crime he had committed in our own kitchen. I felt the bile rise in my throat as I realized the man I had loved for years was a monster who was willing to let me rot in a cell just to hide his own cowardice. The conflict intensified when I demanded they check the office security cameras and the fingerprint patterns on the thermal carafe, knowing I had only touched the lid for a split second while Marcus had handled the contents for hours. I stood my ground, my voice cold and steady, as I told the officers about the morning sickness that had accidentally saved my life and the specific way Marcus had pressured me to eat the poisoned gumbo. The detectives saw through his frantic lies, especially when they discovered that he had used a private browser to research the exact dosage of the drug needed to cause a violent hemorrhage. The air between us was electric with hatred, and for the first time, I saw the mask of the successful CEO completely crumble, revealing the pathetic, cornered animal underneath. He had killed his own illegitimate child in an attempt to destroy mine, a twisted irony that seemed to break his mind right there in front of the authorities. He had turned our anniversary into a funeral, and as the handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists, the war for my life and my baby's future reached its boiling point. If you're ready for the final justice, like and subscribe for the conclusion. The final resolution came not with a bang, but with the quiet sound of a gavel hitting a wooden block in a courtroom 6 months later. Marcus was sentenced to the maximum term for attempted murder and non-consensual termination of a pregnancy. This verdict finally allowed me to sleep through the night without checking my locks. Maya survived, though the physical and emotional scars will stay with her forever, and she eventually became a key witness in stripping Marcus of every asset he tried so hard to protect. I stood in my office today, looking out over the Chicago skyline, and felt a profound sense of peace as I realized that the morning sickness I once complained about was actually a guardian angel in disguise. I sold our house and moved into a sun-filled condo where every corner is filled with the scent of fresh flowers instead of the lingering smell of betrayal and expensive gumbo. My daughter is healthy, a miracle of resilience who will grow up knowing that her mother fought through the darkest night to bring her into the light. I learned the hard way that blood doesn't make a family, and a marriage certificate isn't a guarantee of safety. But I also learned that I am far more potent than any poison Marcus could ever brew. The company is thriving under my sole leadership, and the nursery is ready, a peaceful sanctuary that Marcus will never be allowed to enter. As I look forward to the future, I realized that the shattering of my old life was necessary to build a new one based on truth and the unbreakable bond I share with the little life growing inside me. Justice was served, and the karma that Marcus invited into our lives finally found its permanent home in his prison cell. Thank you for following my journey from the brink of tragedy to the start of a new life. If you're ready for the final justice, like and subscribe for more stories of survival and justice.